Let's go to MS Now Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry, MS Now White House reporter Laura Barone Lopez, and former DHS Chief of Staff in the first Trump administration, Miles Taylor. So, Kevin, let's start with reaction there on Capitol Hill. How are colleagues now receiving this news, and what do we know, what do we need to know about Senator Markwayne Mullin?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of is falling exactly as you might expect, which is Republicans are relatively happy with this decision. Democrats basically saying, OK, it's great that you're replacing the top, but there's all sorts of issues down below that need to be addressed. So this is not going to fix the problems at DHS. When it comes to Mullin's own background, he spent the better part of a decade and a half on Capitol Hill, more than 10 years in the House of Representatives, the last few years in the Senate. During that time, he has served on, among other committees, Armed Services, Health, Education and Labor, and also the Appropriations Committee, notably not on the Homeland Security Committee in that capacity. And he has also been one of the president's most staunch allies here on Capitol Hill. Also, given his past experiences in the House of Representatives, he has, during, for example, the reconciliation fight last year, served as a bit of a liaison, basically the House whisperer for the Senate side as they were negotiating that bill and other things in the last several months. He has also defended ICE and immigration enforcement in light of what we saw play out in Minneapolis. Now, I asked one of the senators on the Democratic side about whether he expects any of his colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle to support Mullin when it comes time for confirmation. This is Senator Ruben Gallego. Spoke to him just moments after Trump made this announcement. Here's what he said.
I can't speculate, but, when we know that they're opening up, dozens of massive warehouses to do mass deportations of which I could only think of has to be people that are, have no criminal records, opposite what they've said, that they're going to continue having to do racial profiling to meet those demands. I can't see how that is going to change by having one person in there and that they're going to be able to get votes for that.
But when it comes to the basic math in the Senate, you only need a basic majority to confirm any nominee. Republicans can do that without Democratic support. And at least at this moment, after I spoke to Gallego, it seems that he'll at least get one Democratic vote, that being Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who has said he will vote aye. Fetterman, of course, has crossed the aisle before on funding bills to end shutdowns and so forth. Anna?
Laura, controversies surrounded Noem basically since she took office. There was that $220 million ad campaign. She defied court orders to release detainees like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. She tapped Greg Bavino to lead the sweeping deportation operations across U.S. cities. She called the two Americans shot by federal agents in Minnesota domestic terrorists. There was also criticism after DHS bought a $70 million luxury jet. And there are even more I could list. So what was the tipping point for the president to make this change and elevate Mullin?
The tipping point was that first one that you mentioned, but not actually the fact that she launched that ad campaign, not the fact that it cost $220 million necessarily. It's that there was this exchange between Kristi Noem and Senator Kennedy, who you played earlier, in which he asked if the president approved this. And she said that the president is who approved her launching this ad campaign, where she's, you see it, riding around on horseback. There was another one earlier last year where she's talking directly to the camera, telling people to self-deport. And that her saying that the president was who signed off on it is what ultimately seems to have done her in. That's according to sources, what sources told us. A White House official said that really upset POTUS. Another source familiar with the decision said that it didn't sit well with him at all. So it's not the other things on that list that you mentioned, Anna. It's not the fact that that she defied releasing detainees, or the fact that she called Alex Preddy and Renee Good, said that what they did was acts of domestic terrorism. Those aren't the things that actually did her in. The other bad headlines, the luxury jet, added up to this. And it's ultimately why the president replaced her with Senator Mullin. But when it comes to what difference this will make, I think it's good to remind people that Stephen Miller is the architect here of so many of these policies. And so when it comes to tactics, they are not expected to change.
Miles, can I first just get your thoughts on that ad campaign, this $220 million ad campaign showing her riding on horseback in front of Mount Rushmore? Had you ever seen anything like that in your time at DHS?
Never, ever, ever. In fact, Anna, I struggled to get 2 secretaries of Homeland Security even to film the videos that they're supposed to put in airports. You know how you walk into the airport and you see the Secretary of Homeland Security telling you to take your shoes off? 2 secretaries of Homeland Security I worked under thought that that was too outlandish to stick their faces in every airport, and that didn't cost any money to film. This is something that cost millions and millions of dollars in any other administration. It would have gotten people from the top to the bottom fired. And so I also think that it's not a coincidence, as Laura notes, that this is ultimately what got her pushed out of the administration, because Donald Trump did not like that he got implicated in this. But put aside the acts of corruption, all the controversies, I think you can say definitively, Anna, that Kristi Noem has been the most consequential Secretary of Homeland Security we have ever seen in the job. And I've known all of them. Everyone who's held that job, I have known. She is the most controversial for one major reason. She has managed to shift the entire department from focused on stopping terrorist attacks and cyber attacks and groups like Al-Qaeda to focusing on the political opposition in the United States by designating them as things like Antifa. In fact, there's almost no agency within DHS, Anna, that the Secretary, Kristi Noem, did not politicize on behalf of the president. Put aside for a second immigration. You can literally go agency by agency. The United States Coast Guard, the cybersecurity agency, CISA, has been gutted because Donald Trump didn't like that its former head, my colleague Chris Krebs, said that the election was free and fair when he lost in 2020. Even the United States Secret Service has been politicized under there when Donald Trump dispatched agents to surveil his political opponent, James Comey. They literally tailed James Comey and to go after his political opponent, Marjorie Taylor Greene. There is no part of DHS that has been untouched by the politicization. And even if Markwayne Mullin wanted to turn it around, it's probably going to take a generation to do that.
Miles, Senator Mullin has no obvious national security or law enforcement background. He was a congressman for a whole decade before becoming a senator. Oklahoma is not a border state. And, of course, his other experience comes from being a business owner. He owned a plumbing company. I believe he owned a restaurant at one point. He's stepping into this role when DHS is shut down, when the U.S. is at war. What does Mullin bring to this role? And do you know how is his selection being received by people inside the department?
Well, I will say this. That second point you made there is actually the most important one because it speaks to the president's judgment. Just a couple of segments ago, Anna, you were talking about how Donald Trump conceded that we may well see Iranian attacks against the United States, perhaps against the American people. And with that backdrop, the president of the United States still upended his Department of Homeland Security. He is benching the defensive team when we are in a war. That's a really, really big deal. And you don't have to play the violin for Kristi Noem to say that that's a reckless and irresponsible thing to do. There's a bigger question here, too, which is, did the Department of Homeland Security even know strikes were going to happen against Iran? Was Kristi Noem or her team even brought into conversations to prepare for this? I have seen no indication. No one at DHS has told me that has happened. That in and of itself is reckless. So Markwayne Mullin, if he does get confirmed, is coming into a department unlike any other Secretary of Homeland Security ever before. We've never had a new secretary confirmed in the middle of a war where the possibility of imminent attack is happening. That's very, very serious. And I actually think because of that, if Markwayne Mullin is expected to be confirmed, they need to start briefing him now and preparing to take that job. This is the hardest job to have in Washington, D.C. He needs to start basically doing it in the shadows now, whether we like him or not, given the severity of the threat. But also, Anna, to your first point, I don't think he's ready for it. His only qualification here is that he has voted consistently with Donald Trump. And I've tended to find that members of Congress have not made very good cabinet secretaries. So given that we're in a war, given that the Department of Homeland Security has been so heavily politicized, we need a serious leader. And I think you're going to see not just Democrats, but perhaps some Republicans on Capitol Hill bulk at this nomination.
We'll watch closely. No date yet, as far as I know, for any confirmation hearing. Miles Taylor, Kevin Fry, Laura Barone Lopez, thank you all.